But look, all popes are going to support migrants, support the poor, support peace. That is, their heart goes out to humanity. That's with the job. Jesus would do the same.
Oh, doesn't it feel a little bit ironic that Republicans will say that Jesus supports immigrants and migrants and the poor, but they themselves would not do the same? Well, yesterday, Fox News contributor Raymond Arroyo spoke with Will Cain about the future of the Catholic Church and placing labels like conservative and liberal on newly deemed Pope Leo XIV. The news is especially relevant since Leo is the first American pope in history, and he has taken shots at both Donald Trump and JD Vance. In February, Pope Leo posted the following article on X. And the headline is, JD Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others. And that was in reference to a statement that Vance made in January saying, there is a Christian concept that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens, and then after that, prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. He posted this article in 2015. Cardinal Dolan says why Donald Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric is so problematic. And last month, Pope Leo reposted criticism of Trump and Bukele's flippant treatment of migrants sent to prisons in El Salvador. However, unlike those who have taken shots at him, like Laura Loomer, for example, Will Cain surprisingly had a much more logical way of thinking about the new pope.
Was selected and ordained by God, and it is not a political office. It's not the same thing as electing a United States senator.
No.
So in some ways it's inappropriate to say, is he conservative? Is he liberal? But is he progressive in the vein of Pope Francis? That seems to be the great question, and I hear you saying the answer is yes. And why that matters is where he may stand and where he may lead his flock on issues as far and as wide as climate change, on DEI, on LGBTQ, on a whole host of issues. And we wonder, where will this new vision be for the Catholic Church?
Well, hope springs eternal, Will, even in the eternal city. And here's what I'd say. It's a mixed bag. The record is a mixed bag, but there are indications. When you saw the Pope come out today, okay, he was wearing the traditional mazzetto, that red garment, atop his white cassock. That's kind of a cry back to the past. That's a wink at tradition.
Right.
Well, Arroyo continued, and he doesn't really seem to care that the Pope has more progressive views because Jesus would do the same.
So a lot of traditionalists and conservative people said, oh, look, he's dressing like a pope. We frankly haven't seen this in 12 years with Pope Francis. So maybe Leo will be, as he mentioned in his speech today, a bridge builder. One hopes, I mean, when you look at his Twitter feed, he was for open borders in the United States and kind of took pot shots at JD Vance and the Trump administration. But look, all popes are going to support migrants, support the poor, support peace. That is, their heart goes out to humanity. That's with the job. Jesus would do the same. I don't know if he'd get so political, and that they're going to have to be careful of. But maybe Pope Leo can bring together the broken parts of this church and Christianity and our society and offer a countercultural moral clarion call that I think we need now.
So as they touched on yesterday on the show, that view isn't exactly shared with the rest of MAGA. Jack Posobiec even issued a warning to conservatives saying he doesn't bode well for Trump supporters.
What I'm seeing from his social media does not bode well for Trump supporters, because we're seeing things here where he's attacking JD Vance, and not years ago, very recently, the choice of an American pope. It is clearly a reaction to President Trump. And I honestly can't see this read in almost any other light. This is clearly a reaction. Now, I call this a reaction because here's the question. Is this someone who wants to work with the American president, being that he is from the United States, being that he is someone who speaks English, being that he is someone who grew up in the United States? Or is this someone who antagonizes? I'm not going to mince words, folks. I'm not going to mince words. This is not the election that conservatives wanted. God save the church.
a very America-centric perspective, but that aside, a lot of people apparently didn't believe that the church was ready for an American pope. According to Cardinal Robert Barron, he told CBS News, Cardinal George of Chicago of happy memory was one of my great mentors. And he said, look, until America goes into political decline, there won't be an American pope. And his point was, if America is kind of running the world politically, culturally, economically, they don't want America running the world religiously. So I think there's some truth to that, that we're such a superpower and so dominant, they don't want to give us also control over the church. But keep in mind, Pope Leo had dual citizenship with Peru, having spent much of his career as a missionary in South America, and he was apparently considered the least American of the American cardinals, whatever that even means. Sharon, let's start with you for the discussion. We're seeing something that has never happened before. This is a historic pope. This is a historic moment, not just for the United States, but for the entire world. And we're seeing that things are not going well for conservatives. They would have much rather see somebody go in the opposite direction from where Pope Francis was, and they were lobbying for it, right? They were putting money into this. They were really trying to get a more conservative pope there. And again, it all feels very America-centric, like they are trying to pull some strings, even though we know that the Pope is supposed to be a religious figure, even though he is a very political figure at the same time. So what do you make of this? What do you expect to see coming out of this with the new papacy?
I think we'll see something probably profound and unprecedented. I mean, can you imagine if they also discover that Black Twitter is right and the new Pope, Pope Leo XIV, has lineage through Black Haiti, okay? I mean, that would be a dream, okay? Listen, the Pope is human, and I tend to reject the political label. He sees cruelty, he's calling out cruelty. You know, Pope Francis, before he died, shortly before, called on other cardinals and people to speak out against the what he felt were atrocities being done to migrants and with immigration and disappearing people. So if this Pope sees it and is loud about it, I don't call that attacking JD Vance, who was not Catholic, now he is Catholic, and that's fine, okay? Totally fine with that. But this Leo is a force to be reckoned with. I do think that perhaps, not in the vain way that Trump wants, to make it, but I do think that everything going on with this president and the cruelty and all kinds of infractions from a moral standpoint, maybe very well did lead us in the direction of a pope from Chicago. Who knows?
This feels like a very American response from the right, right?
Yeah.
There are estimated 1.4 billion Catholics worldwide. There's 350 million people in America. Like, I'm sorry, like this thing isn't centered on America, much less American politics. Like you can't neatly map on the sort of conservative liberal binary on to the Catholic Church and the papacy. It doesn't really neatly tie in that way. To me, as somebody who's a lapsed Catholic myself, if this guy is going to speak out against constant, endless wars and speak to like treating migrants as human beings and our fellow citizens and neighbors, then I mean that's about as good as it's gonna get. Like any pope is going to be anti-abortion, like straight up. Like there's just no Catholic pope who's going to be quote unquote pro-life. But if he's good on war, if he denounces the atrocities that are happening in Gaza to the Palestinian people, or Russia's aggression in Ukraine, and tries to help bring about a peace, I mean that's nice. That's good enough for me.
Yeah, and Sharon, I just want to clarify. I meant like it's political in the sense that the papacy is political historically, right? And the Pope is influential around the world. Arguably, he's one of the most influential people in the world. And there's a reason why conservative Americans really wanted to have a hold on the papacy. They wanted a foot in that door. They were over there, they were in Rome, and they were throwing all these parties and having all these dinners. And they said, "This is who I want to be the Pope." And they said, "Here's our wine from California, and here's all of our millions and maybe billions of dollars if you give us the right Pope." So the fact that there's all this backlash to a guy who is just calling out very basic things like what you were saying, seeing evil and saying this is not right, this is not good. The fact that conservatives are upset about that really says a lot about them and their views on religion in general, their views on Christdom, I'll say, outside of, organized religion. So anyway.
And just quickly, no, I'll just, before you button up, I think it makes me giggle that they're so upset about this, quite frankly, and that's petty. I get it. But listen, I agree with you about politics, but Waz made the point about, this sounds like a very, American type of response. How about it was centered perhaps on American hate and this need to reverse the tide here, that this American president and his friends are spreading throughout the world. I'm not saying that there aren't others and, it's going on in other places, but perhaps the church needs to play a role in beating back what is deemed so damn cool, okay?
Yeah,
and they don't like the socks. Could be that.
I mean, that is a great point, because it was a very American-centric response, but it's also maybe it was a response to Americanism and to Trumpism, because all of that has been exported in no unreal way into to various countries around the world. So maybe it's more of a global response, but it does make sense that the Americans would see that and take it personally.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.